you have to understand the building blocks that make up Indian politics: family, caste, and community. In other words, to understand how parties and chief ministers relate to each other in New Delhi, you have to start by understanding how an individual relates to his family, how a family relates to a caste, and how a caste fits in with a community. And if I'm going to make one point here tonight, it's this: the real story of India today is not a tale of stock markets and trade agreements, investment strategies, or development schemes. The real story of India is in the changes to its culture, in the way that these units of Indian society interact. In fact, I will argue tonight that it is cultural forces and societal trends that will determine the shape of India's future much more than economics or politics. The cultural and social forces that I am talking about are something that can only be seen when you spend a prolonged time in a place. You do not notice them the first night or the first week or even the first year. But while it may take years to gain insight into Indian culture, the breakthrough for me happened in a single moment. One morning I was in Lucknow, and I was eating breakfast at the table, and I had, as many people do in Lucknow, I had a woman who worked for me who made my food and cleaned my apartment. Her name was Sona. She was only about 4 foot 10 inches tall. She was a short woman, but she was imposing. And like most servants in Lucknow, the custom is that they do not eat at the table with you. They don't sit in the chairs that the people who hire them sit in. They sit on the floor. And so one morning I was sitting at the table and I was eating my breakfast, and I looked over and I saw Sona sitting on the floor. And this was again expected behavior, normal behavior in Lucknow. But on this particular morning, I couldn't. I found it very strange. I was alone, and I asked Sona to please come sit with me and eat breakfast with me. And she said no. And I said please, and she said no. And I said I know it's strange for you, but it's strange for me to see you on the floor. Please, come and sit at the table and have some tea. And she did. And then everything changed. The next day she came and she walked right in and she sat down at the table without asking. And she picked up her cup of tea and she said, "Bhaiya, brother, there's not enough sugar in my tea. Can you please get me some?" At that moment, everything changed. Some of my friends wondered what I was doing. They said I was breaking the Dharma. I was breaking the rules of society. And although it doesn't sound like a very courageous act, trying to break down the barriers of caste and gender and class in India is a difficult thing to do. But when I started relating to her and looking into her life, not by reading about her caste in a book or by making a short visit to where she lived, but by being involved with her life on a day-to-day basis, I really started to see how she lived. And Sona, on her part, she couldn't have cared less about the rules of society. As an illiterate woman whose husband had abandoned her and her 3 children, the rules of society had never worked to her benefit to begin with. And once I started to look into Sona's life, I started accepting the invitations of my driver and other average individuals that I knew from my time in Lucknow. And my Hindi was now good enough that I could begin to relate to these people one-on-one, without usually someone from a higher economic or caste group, telling me what I should be thinking of them. I started to spend time focusing on the home life of lower income Indians and lower caste Indians. And as I did so, I started to realize the immense power that family and caste have in Indian society. To illustrate the importance of family in India, I'm going to tell my Indian gangster story. I only have one. And Debbie, you're hiding over there because you were there when this happened. You have to help me tell this story. Me and Debbie were living in Lucknow, and we were invited to a party. And when we got there, a friend told me that that she could introduce me to Lucknow's biggest gangster. And that sounded like an interesting billing, and I thought maybe I could get some good stories out of this. So I said, sure, I'd love to meet him. And she introduced me to this fellow named Faisal. And Faisal was sort of a fat guy, and he had a sparkly shirt on, and he had rings on every finger. And he was pleasant enough. I had a conversation with him. Well, when he heard I was some sort of writer from America, well, he didn't have much interest in talking to me. Instead, he decided he was going to go dance, was going to go enjoy himself. And so he got up and he got on the dance floor. And the next thing you know, and something happened. Someone bumped into him, or did they bump into him, or someone tried to cut in on him, or something?
Someone bumped into him on the dance floor, I think.
Someone bumped into him on the dance floor. And the next thing you know, Faisal was waving a pistol in the air. And he was threatening this poor man in a very angry voice. And everyone at this party was sort of horrified. We thought we were going to see murder in front of our eyes. As we were watching, no one knew what to do. No one wanted to try to disarm him or anything. And we didn't know what was going to happen next. And then there was a soft buzzing noise. And Faisal reached into his pocket and got out his cell phone. And it was his mom. And his mom told him to come home right now. And he put his gun away, and he put his cell phone away, and he drove off. True story. And I remember we made a point not to invite him to our Christmas party. I tell this story, I mention this story, to illustrate the importance of family in India. And the influence of family even over a notorious gangster. The term a close family in India means something totally different than it does here. Families often decide who a person will marry, what profession they will pursue, and which schools they will attend. Time after time, as I was writing my newsletters in India, I would talk to Indians who made decisions based on their family preferences, rather than on what was right for them as an individual or for society as a whole. When I looked at contemporary art in India, for example, I met many young men and women who dreamed of being artists, but who almost inevitably bent to the will of their mother and father, and went on to study something like engineering or computer science. When I looked at AIDS in Uttar Pradesh, I discovered there was a pervasive and almost willful ignorance about the subject. There was a desire to hide the steamier sides